There is so much enthusiasm in Framingham right now because of the Many Cultures, One Heart project. And I think when people just started to see the hearts after all the talk about this project for the last 6 months, they just couldn't believe their eyes, and they were so excited. And it was really designed as a project that would highlight the many artistic and ethnic faces of Framingham. The whole project was put on by the Framingham Center Common Cultural District, and the person behind the scenes who ran every aspect of this project was Stacy David. And she's here with me now to talk about it and to give you better insight into what actually it took to get this project going, to make it happen, and to make it something that the community can enjoy for a really long time. So Stacy, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
There's so much to talk about, so much that went into this project. So I'm going to start at the very beginning and ask you, as the person who was brought in to hired to run this project, how did you and the Framingham Center Common Cultural District come together to actually embark on this project?
So it's very interesting. I know several members on the board. There are people that I have worked with before on arts projects and on other projects. It's interesting because I tell people this is the playground I play in. So I have been working in the arts both as a volunteer and as a paid contractor for many years now. And I've done things like run cultural councils and run cultural districts and run things like public art projects and festivals and that kind of thing. And so a couple members of their board reached out to me to say, with COVID, it's been very difficult for them to run projects. They got their state designation as a cultural district right before the pandemic hit in 2019. And so there's been very few things that they were able to do just with all the regulations. And so they reached out to me last fall to say, we'd really like to do something that kind of puts the cultural district on the map and is something that could happen even if COVID continues and in-person events are not possible. And so what could you help us with? And so first we were talking about maybe some signage and some things like that for the district. And ultimately, this was an idea I had suggested because I've been involved in a project like this in Franklin, but it's also something that you see not all over the country, but also specifically in Massachusetts. There have been several similar public art projects. And it's something that you can have as a very small project or as a really large project. It's easy to scale it. And they liked the idea. So Many Cultures, One Heart was born. When we first started, I said, I'd really love to aim for 15 or 20 statues. And the board said, I don't know that we can go that high. I think maybe we should aim for 5 or 10. And in the end, we had 32. So it tells you how people really got excited and behind the project.
That's a great story. I had really no idea that it was your suggestion and that you had done similar work like this. So kudos to you for actually making that suggestion and then bringing it to life. That's tremendous. And I'm shocked that you made the suggestion knowing just how much work it is.
Well, and it's interesting because I tend to think big. I've been told many times before that I think too big. So I think I may have scared a few people when we first brought this idea up. But, for me, I love the collaborative aspect of things like public art. I love the idea that it's not just one artist showcasing one thing, but it's many artists showcasing many things that are yet all part of one larger project. And I like the idea that different organizations and entities within the city get involved and get behind it, because I think it really makes it a community project that way.
It does, and I'm glad to see that you're not afraid to take on big things, because this was one big thing, and I think it's going to make an impression in Framingham for a very long time. I'm curious, just did you have a team helping you? Was this a one-person show? I mean, there was a tremendous amount of work, right, from promoting it, announcing it, and getting people involved, and then so many different aspects of it. So let's talk about that. How did you decide to first kick it off once everyone agreed that this was going to happen?
It is a lot of work. It was a huge project. I was the only paid staff that was working on it. Different members of the board, who were all volunteers, did step up and do various aspects of the project, but it was really up to me to keep it on track and figure out what needed to be done. So the first thing that we did was to start reaching out to sponsors. So every heart has a sponsor behind it. But on top of that, we applied for a lot of grant and sponsorship funding that was just bigger picture funding. So we got a large Mass Cultural Council grant, as well as some local cultural council funding from a couple of different towns. We got funding through the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism. And then we had several sponsors who not only sponsored a specific statue, but they also came in as a gold sponsor, Access Framingham being one of them, to help out with some additional funding, because the fee that we charged for sponsorship of a statue didn't really cover the whole project. So once we sort of got that process underway, then we put out a call for artists. So the goal was to really highlight the artistic and the ethnic diversity of Framingham. And so to do that, we really wanted a diverse artist base. As I'm sure you are aware, the city of Framingham, the makeup of it, about 52% of the population self-identifies as a minority. And so we wanted to make sure that we had that represented. We didn't want it to be just one race or ethnicity in terms of artists, because we felt like this needed to tell the story of all the people that reside in the city. And the best way to do that was to find an artist that could come up with a design and paint a statue that had a little bit of themselves in it and told a little bit of their own ethnic and cultural and racial story, to better reflect the city as a whole.
That's great. So two things that you mentioned that I want to go back on. I want to talk more about the artists, but first I want to ask you, so how much did the project cost overall? I mean, you had sponsors, you had all kinds of grants. You had to probably apply for those grants and write them and then get the funds. How much did you need to get this off the ground?
So for the 32 statues and the unveiling festival that we held, it was a little over $100,000 project. So it was a significant amount. The cultural district as an entity is a nonprofit, and we are not supported by the city. The city does not fund the cultural district. So it was up to us to raise all of those funds ourselves. So as you say, we wrote many, many grant applications. Some we got, some we didn't. And then it was a matter of reaching out to individual sponsors and organizations to get them to help fund it for us.
That's tremendous. And, you know, I don't think most people know that it costs that much. And what a phenomenal job, because you pulled it off in, what, over a 6-month period?
We started right around October 1st was the first conversation with the board. So it was about 9 months from the very first conversation until the unveiling festival, which is not terribly long.
Not at all. And with a lot of difficulty and challenges, because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So things were a little bit different and had to proceed differently, and maybe we're a little slower. So great job with that. Let's talk a little bit about the artists, because you said you wanted the artists to reflect the diversity of Framingham. And it seemed that you accomplished that. How did you get these amazing artists who created these amazing hearts and to make sure that you were achieving that goal?
So it wasn't easy, in the sense of sometimes, and I'm an artist myself, and I'm also guilty of this, sometimes you see a call for artists and you think, oh, that would be interesting, and then you have to actually apply. And so getting people to actually respond and apply to be part of it was a little bit challenging at first. My husband will tell you that at one point he really thought there was going to be 20 statues in my garage that I was painting. Luckily that did not happen. In fact, I haven't painted any of them. But we reached out a number of different ways. So we put a call for artists in all of the local papers. We put it on our Facebook page. But then we also reached out to a lot of different specific cultural groups. So for example, I reached out to the Brazilian consulate and had several very nice conversations with them to say, can you put me in touch with some Brazilian artists? Because obviously Framingham has an enormous Brazilian population and we wanted to make sure that was represented. I reached out to a lot of the different churches to find out, because we have several different churches in town. We have a Brazilian church in town. There's a large Filipino church. There are, in the area, there's Korean churches. There is the Greater Framingham Community Church. So we reached out to a lot of those as well, because we felt like those specific organizations had a population that might be interested in participating and would be able to help with the diversity aspect of it. And then we also just, every single artist I spoke to, I said, tell me if you know of another artist that would also be interested. And so a lot of it was word of mouth. I held several information sessions on Zoom, and there were a number of people who were helpful in just helping get the word out for other artists for that. We did translate the call for artists into both Spanish and Portuguese, which I think helped also. Clearly, if we want people to feel welcome and part of the project, then you need to make sure that you are reaching out to them in their native language. So that was a big aspect of it as well. And in the end, we were thrilled. We had about 50 applications that came in, and the final pool ended up being just about 50-50. In fact, there was slightly more than 50% of the artists on the project represent a diverse community. So we have every race represented, including an Indigenous artist, which I am thrilled about. We have many different cultures and ethnicities represented. We also have LGBTQ plus artists. We had disabled artists. We had artists from teenagers to seniors. So we do feel like we really got a nice cross-section of people that represented who make up the city of Framingham themselves.
That's phenomenal. And then you matched those artists up with the sponsors of the Hearts. How did you do that?
So once we had a kind of approved pool of artists, so after they applied, we had a panel of folks from the cultural district. So we had an art history professor at Framingham State University, and we had the head of the Danforth Art Museum, as well as myself, reviewed all the applications. Once we chose a pool, then we sat down with each sponsor individually and said, okay, take a look at these different applications, because portfolios were submitted as part of the application. And they chose their artists based on what they felt was somebody that just meshed with their vision. So sometimes it was based on color or style, sometimes it was based on the artist's background or ethnicity. So there were a lot of different factors that went into that, but each of the different sponsors got to choose their artist. And then the artist and the sponsor sat down together and came up with a design and sketched things out. And then the artist submitted those designs for approval, both to the sponsor and then ultimately to us. We wanted to make sure that every heart had some representation of diversity. So sometimes it is quite overt. So you'll have portraits on there, for example, and those portraits are men and women and children and different ethnicities and things. Sometimes it is more subtle. So for example, one of the statues is representing Eastleigh Farm, and they have butterflies on it that are all different colors to represent different cultures and ethnicities. There is one that was designed that is down at City Hall in Anhouse Feldman, and she has birds all over it, and the birds are all different species and colors, again, to represent diversity. So some of it was a little more subtle, but we wanted to make sure that somehow there was some representation of diversity in each statue. And once they had approved designs, they were off and running.
So what is your hope for how the community keeps connected to this project over the long term? And what will be done to continuously reinforce it?
So the Cultural District Board is coming up with a scavenger hunt, which will be posted on our website so that people can go around and visit. We were very careful to make sure that all of the hearts are in accessible locations. So for example, there is nothing that is on a median that you can't get to. Everything is within a park or on a private property location, such as the sponsor's location, but all in locations that people can access them. And so our hope is that people will travel around, see the hearts, take pictures of themselves with the hearts, post them to social media and specifically to our Facebook page, we hope, but even to theirs, just to get other people excited about it and wanting to interact over the long term.
Now, this treasure hunt that you're going to have, so to speak, how will that unfold, and what's the time frame? What's the time frame for that? Will there be prizes? What will you get to incent people? Will it, to discover the different locations? What's the goal? Obviously, you want everyone to see all the hearts, right?
Right, right. And ultimately, we will actually post a map. We do have an interactive map that we created. We haven't posted that yet online because we would like people to take the time to hunt them up and find them through the scavenger hunt. In terms of how that's going to play out, the board is still discussing whether they want it to, whether there is going to be any kind of prizes or anything, or whether it's just a fun thing to do kind of scavenger hunt. Ultimately, there's been a lot of talk about other types of things that could be created to tie into the hearts. So for example, t-shirts, we have a professional photo front and back of every single heart that we had taken. So we've talked about, well, would we want to create a t-shirt that had all the hearts on it, or keychains, or collateral sort of pieces like that. So there are things like that that we could use. But we're really hoping that it becomes something that Framingham is known for. With the Framingham Heart Study, the heart is already something that is kind of already has a connection to Framingham. And so we feel like this is going to reinforce that, and hopefully it will become sort of the symbol of the city going forward.
All of these ideas sound really exciting, and people love t-shirts and they love all kinds of swag that has the different logos, and I'm sure sponsors will want swag with their individual hearts, and the community may want swag with all the hearts. The photos are just so captivating. The colors, the shine, the shape, of the heart, the size. So it looks like there's tremendous potential to really utilize all that visualization, and even, the documentary that Access Framingham created, and this program as well will help get the message out to many more people. It looks like it has a long shelf life and a lot to recreate over time. Who's going to do that?
I'm sorry, who's going to do what?
Who's going to do all of that?
So the Cultural District Board, so it is a board of volunteers, but they are working hard continuing this in terms of ongoing discussions of how to continue to promote it and things like that. One thing that we were really excited about was capturing some of the actual stories of the artists. So you all did a wonderful job for us in terms of the documentary and capturing some of that. The artists themselves did some of that. So every statue has on its base a plaque that has the artist's name and the title of the piece and the sponsor, but it also has a QR code, and each of those QR codes are unique to that specific statue. If you scan the QR code, you get a chance to watch a video. Most of them are around 2 minutes or so that each artist created that shows, in some cases, they show their process. So they've got some process photos and videos throughout. In some cases, it's just describing the heart itself. But in all cases, the artists are talking a little bit about the impetus behind the design and what it means to them, and some of sort of their own personal story that went into it. And I think that's important too, to your point, for the longevity of the project and for people to continue to interact and engage with it. It's understanding that these are not just static pieces of art, but that there was a story that went into each one. And that the artists across the board, I was blown away by how much the artists really thought about.
It was so impressive. It was so impressive. The artists just really outdid themselves. Every heart was different. Every heart was so impressive. And what I kept hearing when I went out to look at the hearts at the first unveiling was the number of people saying, why didn't I get a heart? How can I get a heart? People that now want a heart that didn't know about it or just didn't have the opportunity in the first round. What about all those additional requests? Do you think that they'll be able to join in and maybe add more hearts around the city?
I think that is the hope, is that this project will continue. It's interesting because you're right. We've already had some people and organizations reach out to say, is it too late? Can I still get one? And so I think that is one of the ongoing discussions, is to say, is this something that they want to do every year? Is it something that they just want to add a few more in on a second round? And I think part of that will be dependent upon what is the level of interest for other organizations to get involved.
Yes, and also, Stacy, question for you. Will they last? They have a shiny coating on them, but will they last? And what happens if, unfortunately, I hate to even say it, what happens if there's ever any cases of graffiti or, any damage done to any of the parts? What gets, so curious about those two things.
So they will last. They are made of fiberglass, and they have a metal post that was formed into it when they created the fiberglass form itself. So they're made sort of like what you would make a boat out of. So they do have longevity to them. They have an auto clear coat on the outside, which is similar to a varnish. Technically, it is a different substance, but it is the same clear coat that you actually have on a car. And so it has 2 layers of auto clear coat on there. That provides a protective coating, both in terms of wind and weather and all of that, but also, heaven forbid that someone should graffiti it, it can be buffed out. Our hope is that the residents of Framingham are as excited as we are about it and that nobody ever destroys one or graffitis one, but if that should happen, the hope is that it could be cleaned off. And ultimately, they will last for many, many years.
And so now, moving forward, I'm just curious in terms of the amount of publicity that the project has gotten, if you think other communities are going to be trying to do similar projects, maybe not with hearts. We've seen some in other communities with dolphins or cows, and now Framingham has hearts. Any others that you know about that you think will be on the horizon that'll be kind of motivated by, or by this particular project?
We certainly hope so. I think that public art is a wonderful thing. I think it brings a community together, and I think it can transform a landscape of a city and really be a draw for visitors and tourists as well. So I think there's a lot of benefits to public art. So I would love to see this project be replicated in other places. I do know that Cape Cod had a project a few years ago that was similar. I believe theirs was Wales. I think one of the towns north shore of Boston had lobsters at one point. Franklin, as I mentioned, had a project. Theirs is ladybugs, because the Franklin school children were the ones that petitioned the state to make the ladybug the state bug. So each town has kind of their own impetus for whatever their form is. But I would love to see it replicated in other cities as well.
How do you, as the person who ran this project and put your heart and soul into it for 9 months, how do you then just walk away?
It's hard. I have been thrilled by the response. The unveiling festival that we had on June 18th, we really had no idea how many people were going to come out. Between the fact that this was a first-time festival and with COVID, we honestly had no idea. And in the end, we think that we had close to 2,000 people who came, which was phenomenal. And that to me shows how excited people were about the project. Since the unveiling and since things have started to be installed around town, there have been several news stories on it. So CBS News ran a story last week on it, and that has gotten picked up by a couple of other stations. I know that one of the Brazilian stations also ran a TV spot on it. So it's getting some press and it's getting some recognition, and I wouldn't be surprised if that continues over the course of the summer. I'm sad to walk away because I have spent a lot of time in the last 9 months with a lot of different organizations in Framingham. But I think it's wonderful, and I have made some great friendships and I've made some great relationships from a business standpoint. And so I'm looking forward to continuing some of those. I have moved on to Belforge Art Center in Medfield is my new gig. And that's a new project that's happening in Belforge. And so I'm actually really looking forward to having some partnerships and things with some Framingham organizations that I previously didn't have a relationship with and now do. So I think that's very exciting. The arts world is a small world, so I'm excited to build more relationships there.
Are there any parting words that you'd like to convey, and any memories of this encounter and this project that you'd like to leave us with?
I have to say, I think one of the most thrilling and touching parts of all of this was the response of the artists from the teenagers on up. I have to say, when I watched the video from the high schoolers, it made me cry. You know, they really put their heart and soul into it. All the artists did. We paid them a small stipend for this, but not nearly equivalent to the amount of work that went into it. And so I so appreciated the fact that they all took it so seriously, and it was so meaningful to them that they took the time and effort to really make it wonderful. So for me, the treasured memories are the artists' friendships that I have made, and seeing how excited everybody was about it, and being just really, really proud of what we put together in a fairly short amount of time.
Well, another great accomplishment for you to be very proud of, and you leave the city of Framingham and the Framingham Center Common Cultural District with an incredible project to live with for many, many years to come. So congratulations to you, Stacy, and I'm sure that this next project you're working on and every other project will be just as successful, because you are an incredible coordinator for these types of things, and you've really outdone yourself. So thank you very much, and we at Access Framingham here enjoyed working with you as well, and being a part of this incredible project that just is meant to signify the richness of Framingham's cultural diversity. We're really excited about that.
Thank you so much, and you know, you guys were terrific to work with, so I appreciate all the support. I know that you guys were a little short-staffed, and you came through like champs for everything we asked of you, so we appreciate the support on your end as well.
Absolutely, and kudos to our producer Shivarsh Morrissey for the work that he did to bring all of this to fruition, and he was just as excited about the outcome. So we're all proud to be a part of it, and thank you for your everlasting impact on Framingham.
Thank you so much.
Melissa Stratton Pandina is the artist who created the Access Framingham TV Heart. In this video, you can hear and see her passion when she talks about what she put into it and what the experience meant to her. Can you talk a little bit about, what the theme is behind the Access Framingham Heart?
Yes, the theme behind the heart is that Access Framingham uplifts voices of people who aren't necessarily heard. So they uplift the voices of students, of protesters, of musicians and artists, and different creatives, and all the different things that are happening in the town. And we try to give voice to all of them and set the heart.
So how did you connect everything on the heart? What were the elements, what were the graphics you chose to use, and why?
One of the things that we, in our first conversation that we had, was talking about how Framingham Access started when they started laying the wires all over to start cable, and how that the towns negotiated that they would get their own channel for the access. So that, and then when I went to go see your lovely place, it is covered in wires. So when my first thought was like doing wind and having things uplifted, but after the visit and seeing how much this wires was really part of y'all's story, the wires became a big point of the whole painting.
And you can see the wires all over the heart.
Yep.
Kind of going from one scene to the next, and all the way around the heart with the cameras and the people that are performing, the people that are bringing different information and entertainment to the viewers.
Exactly.
So how long did it take? And
About 100 hours.
100 hours. And what elements did you, what materials did you use? And
Acrylics. It's all acrylics. It's I use a really fine acrylic. It's M-gram acrylics. They're really soft. I'm an oil painter by trade, so when I have to switch to acrylics, I'm a little bit frustrated, but it was good.
And how did you get involved with this project?
I saw it on, I think, Facebook. It was just a random posting that I saw.
Was that like an outreach to find artists?
Outreach to find artists.
And you said, that's for me.
That is for me. The big thing that we needed in Metro West and Central Mass is infrastructure for artists, so we find these projects easier. But I was lucky enough to find it on Facebook this time.
Melissa created such a beautiful and meaningful heart for Access Framingham TV. Since there'll be a scavenger hunt to find all the hearts, I can give you only one clue to find the AFTV heart. It's in a park on the south side of Route 9. Hopefully you'll have fun finding that heart and all the 31 others around the city.